Oh.
Hello and welcome. I am Science Mom, an online educator, author, and YouTuber. And this is my brother,
Jepson Taylor.
And today we are going to take you through the top 5 misconceptions and realities about AI, things that you should understand if you want to understand AI. So without further ado, here we go. Misconception number 1, AI is objective and error-free.
So one of the things we talk about is garbage in, garbage out. So it's only as good as the data that it's trained on, and when it's trained on historical data, it's never fully prepared for new data. There's a famous saying that all models are wrong, but some are useful. So it can make predictions that are better than random, and in some cases they can be really, really good. But we always want to retrain models. We always want higher quality data. And I think the one thought-provoking question would be, would you rather have a better model or better data? And for people that have been in industry, they always choose better data.
Ooh, I like that thought. And I ought to give a real quick, just kind of subscript. You might hear banging in the background. We are live and there's a little bit of construction going on. We're just going to ignore it. Hopefully it's not too distracting. All right, misconception number 2, AI is sentient or conscious. This one's kind of a tricky one. We'll talk about it just briefly.
Yeah, and this is getting more complicated now because of technologies like GPT-4. It also opens up this theme of personification. So even years ago, I could have a little chat bot that might seem witty. It might have some human characteristics. I could intentionally try to put more of those in. So we call that personification, where you're making AI behave more human-like. Or if I want AI systems that will read your emotion from a camera, are you happy or sad? That's something that people can do intentionally. But now with GPT-4, we have these AI systems that are becoming much more sophisticated. So there's that talk that GPT-4 is showing sparks of AGI. So AGI stands for Artificial General Intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And there are debates online that it does have some elements of consciousness at a very basic level.
And we should point out that the term consciousness is not really well defined or understood. Yeah. You can get just, defining whether we as humans are conscious, you can get into all sorts of philosophical debates. But even though this seems like a really obvious thing to say, AI is not human, it is worth just making that distinction, because a lot of times people have misconceptions about what AI is because they think of it as being on par and thinking and behaving just like a human does. Misconception number 3, there is one type of AI.
There's lots of types.
There are lots of types, so let's unpack a couple really important distinctions.
So Deep Blue, that was the program that was used to beat the world's best chess player. I think it was 1997, which is fascinating because at the time when that happened, that was seen as a big human achievement. But the program that was used in Deep Blue to beat that chess player, it can run just fine on your phone. You could download it. You could, essentially download something equivalent that's even better than that and run it locally on your laptop.
So we'd consider that to be a pretty simple program.
Oh yeah,
today, right?
Yeah, and I think that this is also true. Maybe there's a theme in humanity. Until someone does it, it's a big deal. So when Deep Blue came out, it was a big deal. Now anyone can have superhuman chess. And then when Go first came out, AlphaGo, that was a big deal. But now you can download your own and play with these programs. So that's kind of fun to think about. Is there a version of GPT-4 5 years from now that it is just a toy example that everyone's playing with it, and it's just as sophisticated as it is today?
But this distinction here between narrow versus general, so a narrow AI just has a specific single purpose, right?
Yeah, like exactly.
Deep Blue was built to play chess, and that was it. It could not do chemistry or solve math problems for you or anything else.
Yeah, it can't classify your photos. It can't grade your essay. But artificial general intelligence, that can do a lot more tasks. It's a lot more, you don't need a lot of human effort to make it do something. You just introduce it to some data experience and then it will adapt.
And do we have AGI right now? You mentioned that some people are saying that GPT-4 has sparks of AGI. Do people think that it qualifies as general intelligence?
Yeah, the same API can be used to write code. It can be used to do mathematical reasoning. It can be used to translate something. It can be used to find grammar mistakes. It can't do everything, but it can do a lot more than the narrow applications before.
And then within machine learning, we have several different subsets, and we could do a whole entire series of videos on each of these, but let's just go through sort of some common terms that you might hear when you're reading and learning about AI so that you better understand how they fit together.
So under the big AI umbrella, which is maybe outside of this graphic, under that you have machine learning. The reason they call it machine learning is it often goes through this process of training. So it's looking at historical data, and the machine or the computer is adjusting weights, it's adjusting rules based on the historical data. So that's called machine learning. And then there is a subset of machine learning that includes neural networks, deep learning, and then transformer models. That's a very specific type of deep learning. So when you hear the term chat GPT, GPT stands for a generative pre-trained transformer. So you have generative AI, which showed up around 2014, where AI can, often we think of AI making a prediction. I'm going to approve your loan, yes or no. I'm going to have a classification or a regression. So a regression would be a continuous number. I'm going to approve a loan amount. That's an example of regression. Generators, they can produce images, video, audio, and so it's a little wild to think about that an image can be a prediction. And that's what you see with Midjourney and with DALL-E 2. These are predictions. These brilliant images that people are creating, they are predictions where the input going in is text.
And tell us real quick how algorithm fits in here, because I think a lot of people who don't have a solid understanding of AI, they hear about AI being used, for example, with algorithms that show you what's coming next on your social media feed. Is an algorithm the same thing as a neural network, or is it part of one?
In algorithms, that's at a very high level above all of this. So think of an algorithms as if you write code and if it goes into a function or a digital tool, that is an algorithm.
So if you have like an input going in, some code, and an output coming out, that's an algorithm?
Yeah, it's an algorithm.
Okay. And then a neural network or a deep learning, that's more complicated.
That's an example of an algorithm.
Okay.
So deep learning, that is an algorithm that's been developed, and there's lots of different types of deep learning models.
All right, on to our next misconception, number 4. AI's decisions are always explainable, and you can debate this next one. We'll talk about it in the next slide. We understand how deep learning models work. Let's unpack this a little bit more.
So when I first saw this graphic, there's a knee-jerk reaction that I have, and that is a black box is bad. And AI has had criticisms in the past for being a black box, that if I train this random forest or this neural network on your problem, it works, but I can't tell you why, or it's making a prediction, but I can't defend that prediction. And fortunately, within the last 5 to 7 years, we've made a lot of progress on telling a story that a domain expert or subject matter expert can react to. So you have feature importance plots that will give you a complete breakdown of what inputs are driving this particular model behavior. For deep learning, you have activation maps, gradient activation maps, so you can see what part of a spectrogram, video, or image, or even text that the model is paying attention to. You can do heat mapping. And then for prediction level insights, we have something called Shapley prediction values. So if I'm making a prediction about your loan, I should be able to include 3, 4, or 5 reason codes that are specific, that your loan is not being approved for these reasons. And that's how you can augment a process with a human, because a human can react to that and say, oh, this is exactly right, I concur, or a human can react and say, I disagree.
So we're making progress in understanding how it works better, but is it still true?
That said, GPT-4, these huge neural networks are so sophisticated that there's a lot we don't know.
So input goes in, and we can't say for sure exactly how the output is achieved.
Yes. And there's this concept of emergence where we keep finding more and more capabilities that GPT-4 is capable of that we didn't know previously.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of a gotcha.
Yeah. One example of that I want to share real quick is that you had narrow AI that was designed specifically for chemistry applications to be able to understand chemical reactions and predict chemical reactions. And then in the AI dilemma, they pointed out that one of the emergent behaviors in GPT-4 was that it outperformed the narrow AI models with chemistry knowledge, even though it hadn't been specifically trained for that.
Well, and maybe there's this theme or fabric that connects all this, and it's this concept of language. So when you think of language, you think of a spoken or written language, but programming is a language, or chemistry, methods or process, that's also a language. And so I think this model's ability to adapt or to jump into a new language that's something we see more frequently now.
Excellent. Our last misconception is kind of a twofold one because I feel like these are both different sides of the same coin. So you have the idea that AI is a panacea, it can solve anything. And then you also have on the flip side, the idea that AI is number one threat to humanity, incredibly dangerous no matter what. Let's talk about what AI really is.
So it is a tool, it is a catalyst, it allows you to do things faster, but that also means that ultimately this comes down to the people. So good people can do things faster. So a physician can do things faster. They're less likely to miss your 1 in a million or 1 in 10 million diagnosis. That's great. But also bad people can do things faster. So a malicious attacker or someone who's trying to steal your identity, they could use these tools to do that more effectively. Or we see with voice, a few minutes of me recording your voice, which is, I don't have to record it because it's on the internet. It's easy for someone to replicate your voice. And so authenticating in this world has to change quickly because you can't rely on a video or voice being someone's password. And that's all already shown up where people have called someone. The example you can look up on the news, they called a mother with the voice of the daughter, where they sounded like they were in distress, like she'd been kidnapped and they were demanding a ransom, where in reality she was fine. And so
the daughter had not been kidnapped.
The daughter had not been kidnapped.
But they were able to use AI to get the voice to sound exactly like the daughter.
Yeah, and there've been some other cases of fraud where someone has called impersonating a CEO, asking for a wire transfer, and so it's the spam or the fraud game has really stepped up, where it's not just I'm a prince that needs
from Nigeria who needs money.
Yeah, who needs a money order. Now I'm someone and I'm spoofing the phone where you could be getting a phone call from me. So on your caller ID it says it's coming from me. You hear my voice, but it's not me.
Well, that's a little alarming. I'm not ready for spam that sophisticated yet, but like you mentioned, it can also be used for good purposes, and its impact is going to depend entirely on how we as people use it and how we regulate it.
Well, and on that topic, anytime AI has done something negative, so if you look in the news when AI has been racist, sexist, or it's had some negative outcome, I would argue those examples, people were not proactive. So they were reactive. They're saying, oops. So AI is a very powerful tool. Anywhere you're applying it, it definitely benefits you to be proactive. So have a discussion. How could this go wrong? What are the worst case scenarios? Brainstorm with your team. Are we concerned about some type of bias that could exist? Are we concerned about this model breaking? Are we concerned about this model being completely automated? Could that become an issue? And the more that we can have those conversations, the more likely you are to not have regret.
That's a good point. I like that. I'm going to say hello real quick to some people who are watching us live. I see we have Esther watching in Italy, and hello to Tiny Munson watching in Vietnam, to Liza watching in Nevada, Amber watching in West Virginia. Hello, Spy. If you have questions, type them in the chat right now because we do have just a little bit of time for Q&A. So let us know if you have any questions. And My question for you before we go to audience questions is do you think AI needs to be regulated? And if so, what type of regulations or like safety rails do you think we should have around AI systems?
So Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, he presented to Congress, and he was saying AI systems that are beyond a certain capability, where potentially the territory that these models are entering it's a new territory where they could essentially self-replicate. So they could completely build themselves up from the ground. And if you're able to do that, it's you and I were talking earlier. It's different than a worm or a digital worm or digital virus self-replicating, because that already happens today. It infects a machine, it copies itself and sends it out. This is different. If AI is able to self-replicate, it's able to do it with full knowledge of its components, meaning it could self-improve.
And it could change itself.
It could change itself.
So it's not like a computer virus for like an old XP model where you still have that same virus circulating. It's like the AI we have today, if it could replicate, the AI for tomorrow could be completely different.
Yeah, and that is definitely concerning. We haven't seen that yet. We don't believe that GPT-4 is sophisticated enough to do that. But this then goes back to the alignment problem, because if I have an AI system that is sophisticated enough that it can do that it could self-replicate, what are the goals of that system? What is it trying to do? Is it trying to maximize its compute resources? Because if that's the case, then now you have a virus. It's just going to go and consume all the computers on the planet.
Are we making progress in terms of governments to putting safety rails against a self-replicating AI system, or do you think we don't need to worry about it yet because it's far out?
I think one of the big concerns when social media came online, I think the governing bodies did not do a good job at putting in, and that was one of the arguments that was brought up, that we really failed with some of the key regulation with social media, and so the hope is maybe we do have a savvy regulatory board of experts that understand this space
and can maybe anticipate some problems before they pop up.
But the issue is we don't have that yet. We don't have that right now. Fortunately, these AI systems. It's not something that I can go build in the basement, because they require such a large amount of data and such an incredible amount of compute. And by incredible amount of compute, we're talking 30 to 60,000 GPUs. So you literally have to spend $1 billion on compute
to build a system
this powerful. So that's good, but in a few years that might not be true. In a few years it might be, your neighbor could build this. And if your neighbor can build a system that can self-replicate, that's concerning.
I hope we can get some of those regulations in. It is kind of wild to think about how much science fiction has become reality within the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Couple quick questions for you. So Teeny Munson asks, I heard ChatGPT can sometimes do illegal things, even though it's not supposed to be allowed to do that. How does that work?
So it has rules and gatekeeping that there's examples online where you can get around it. And that the issue with a system this sophisticated with is you have millions of people that are being clever. And if you use a slightly different word,
you can bypass the rule.
You can bypass some of the safeties. So if you copy source code from a web page, and if you ask it to write a web scraper or to write something that'll do something meaningful with code, it's going to slap your hand
and say no.
It's going to say it can't do that. But if you are persistent, I think the potential's there that you can get around it. So there's people that talk about how to get around these safeties, and that is a concern.
And probably at OpenAI, you have the whole team of engineers who are working to refine the safeties and make sure they're more foolproof.
And this brings up a concern that I have personally. When you have this many people interacting with a system that is this powerful, you should have identity verification. And so what I mean by that is, in the US, if you are making the system build malicious code for you, and if we know who you are, you've got your social security number, we know who you are, we would want, my opinion would be, I should be able to prosecute you.
There should be consequences.
There should be consequences
for someone using ChatGPT-4 to build viruses and
that
malware.
That would discourage people. But if you think that all of your GPT-4 logs can be used against you in a court of law, that might make you hesitate. But right now, the validation quality isn't there. That you could have a fake phone number, fake email.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it doesn't take much to validate someone today.
Another good question from Aaron Knowles: is there an environmental impact of AI in terms of the resources required for it?
Yeah, when the compute is that large and the demand is that large, you are burning a lot of electricity. But the benefit, I think a lot of people in the industry would not shy away from this, because there have been some reports about the amount of carbon dioxide that was produced with some of these bigger GPU trainings. But I think the opportunity, when you have this entire body of human knowledge, I would argue in the next 5 or 10 years, the breakthroughs with clean energy, they will outweigh the short-term costs. So if you're worried about the carbon dioxide produced in the next 5 years, I would argue this is better overall for the next 20 to 30, because we will come up with more sophisticated solar, long-term sustainable clean energy.
Certainly better rewards than Bitcoin mining, right?
Yes, I can't really defend that.
Good question. Let me check really fast, see if we have any other questions that have come in. Amber asks, when can we expect DALL-E or Midjourney to be able to make actual words? Because right now, anytime you put in a prompt where they ask for words, gibberish comes out.
Yeah. So that's a great call out. So if you ask it to make Vogue covers, sometimes it will get Vogue correctly, but other times there's an extra letter there. So there's a few issues with Midjourney where it has struggled. So one of those is with hands, with fingers. That was an issue that people called out. Text. I did a Midjourney image where I needed to have this girl cutting her hair with scissors, and that was really hard, because you have to think about the images that these systems are trained on. If I don't have a lot of scissors in the hair cutting, it's going to struggle to imagine that. And so I think when you get, right now we're in Midjourney version 5.1, as we move to 5.5, 6, 7, 8, definitely in the next 2 to 3 years. The big unknown right now is GPT-4 has an image capability that has not been released to the public yet. And it appears from the demo that it's much more sophisticated than what we've had access to. And so there is a chance that this year, if the GPT-4 image APIs become available, the text issue could be fixed this year.
Because ChatGPT-4 obviously does very well with text.
Yes, it's there's a term in this industry called multimodal, and what they mean by that is it's able to handle different types of data. And so GPT-4 is able to handle images and text and code and various languages. And so it might already be fixed, but if you wait a few years, definitely.
Last 2 questions, because we're just about out of time, but I'm curious to know, what are you most excited about for AI, and what are you most apprehensive or nervous about? Like, is there anything that kind of gives you pause when you're thinking about this new technology and how quickly it has accelerated in the last year?
I'm excited for my legal spend to go down.
You're not going to need to hire a lawyer anymore?
Or if I do hire lawyers, it will be greatly reduced as far as the labor. The billable hours, I think, will be cut 90%.
And what are you most apprehensive or nervous about?
Well, and I'm also excited about healthcare, big breakthroughs in healthcare. What am I the most nervous about? I am a little bit nervous about an AI arms race, because people have talked about this in the past. If it really looked like one country was going to get across the finish line with the singularity, it would actually make sense to go to war. Like, people have talked about that in the past. So like, if China really thought that GPT-4 was going to cross the line of the singularity,
when you say singularity, you mean GPT-4 would get to a point where we just can't predict what happens next. It is AGI. It can do anything. Maybe define singularity for those who don't know.
It's this. So we're in an AI race. We're off to the races. OpenAI is ahead. You have Bard. You have some other people that are chasing them. And the idea of the singularity, it's compounding innovation, compounding intelligence, it's self-improvement. So if we are having this casual race, this might sound fun, but if you are accelerating, then you're going to go somewhere that I just can't get to. So if you're accelerating faster and faster and faster and faster, now in a year or two, you're doing 10,000 Nature or Science worthy publications in an hour. What does that mean? What does that mean for me if I'm in second place or third place? And so people have talked about this being
a significant risk.
It's comparable to the nuclear arms race. So if you have innovation that is capable of accelerating 10,000 years in the future, then a lot of these conflicts today become laughable. Like even intercontinental ballistic missiles become a joke, where today they're quite serious, that we are still worried about extinction from nuclear war. We don't want that to exist. But the first country that gets across this finish line, that is something that's on the table for them.
And what can we do to maybe lower the risk of this intellectual arms race towards the singularity? This is not reassuring.
Well, what did someone say? It'd be great if humans could work on bigger goals together. Like one of the things someone was saying is it's great to have humans explore space, because when you're in space on the International Space Station, the differentiation between nationalities kind of goes away, because isn't this awesome that humans are in space? So I think it's hard to know what the easy answer is, because you have global conflict today. Like there is a war between Ukraine and Russia, and there's political tensions between these different countries. I would hope for a future where humans can work together, collaborate better. But when you have authoritarian regimes, they want to stay in power, and so that kind of becomes an issue. How does an authoritarian regime work well with a democracy? They're kind of at odds.
Well, as you pointed out earlier, there are a lot of areas of innovation, especially in medicine and climate change, clean energy, where AI could really do a lot of good. So I hope we can use the tool in a good way. And thank you for joining us to answer questions. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, maybe it'd be nice to end on something more positive. AI is going to be incredible for education. Topics that were very dry and overwhelming can be taught in story form or analogies. So there is something really exciting for the new generation. They're going to learn a lot more out of in a more engaging method than we did.
It's true. And I love what Aaron says here. There are, the Horizon video game makes me super nervous for some of this, but I can't help but be excited about the potentials too. I feel the same way, Aaron. It's an incredible time to be alive, and for sure, it's not going to be boring, right?
It won't be boring. So there's a lot. I think of life as a series of questions, and the questions that will be answered, it's only going to increase.
Yeah, for sure. So. Well, thank you again for joining us. And I would encourage you, if you aren't following Jepson Taylor's LinkedIn, he posts some really cool stuff about AI there. So you can definitely learn more about what he's doing and how AI is evolving there. We'll see you later.
Thanks, everyone.